All right, well, the euro is trading higher today against the U.S. dollar, reversing course from those earlier losses after those headlines came out on Europe's rescue fund, Germany and France agreeing to increase the fund to $2 trillion. Well, it was one of the worst performing currencies in the third quarter, down 7.7% against the dollar. Perhaps it's on course for a new trend, though. Well, our next guest says this depreciation and subsequent rally, I suppose, in the euro could have a significant impact on U.S. companies' earnings reports. Wolfgang Koester is CEO of Fireapps. He's joining us now here in New York. His company helps businesses hedge their currency risk, which must be virtually impossible. Wolfgang, it's good to see you again, by the way.
Great to see you as well.
So on a day like today, how does a company become currency agnostic, if you will, hedge for day-to-day movements?
Yeah, so what they're doing is they're really looking to understand all their exposures. And it is not just about the euro, but certainly I think we'll start there because of the large exposures of them. But the idea is to really understand the exposures and then manage it towards a certain risk, which companies size of Google, they came out with an earnings less than $1 million impact to a $10 billion quarter. So there, it's very doable. You've got to understand it and manage it properly.
How are they making their own forecast for where rates are going to go? What does it mean to be agnostic at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, they're actually not speculating at all. They're actually just looking at where are we, what are our exposures. Just think about it. If you take it, for example, in the airline business, in the oil, you know how much fuel you're going to use to actually get somebody from point A to point B in 7 days. You know, so you look at the airlines, you look at what your product will cost. It's similar with the currencies. You know what your revenues projections are. You're going to know what your expenses are. You know your accounts receivables or your accounts payables, your intercompanies, et cetera. And understanding that picture, not easy, I will say that. It is not easy to understand. But once you understand it, it's not that difficult to manage.
All right, let's connect the dots on what's been happening in the euro and what U.S. companies might be impacted. We are at the very beginning of earnings seasons, of course, and so you have three that you focused on, Philip Morris being the top one that you think could be very exposed to what is happening in Europe at the moment. Yeah,
so they are, they have over 40% of their revenues out of Europe. And, in their last reports, they showed that they had about $13 billion worth of derivative products on. Well, at that level, they're about $10 billion under-hedged. So if you take those comparisons from last quarter and say they're going to have about the same ratio, which a lot of companies who don't have the technology to really understand it, very typical. 60, 70% hedge ratios is very typical. When you all of a sudden have a 7, 8% move in the euro, you're going to see it. You saw it on IBM. IBM came in very strong, looked really good, but then the foreign exchange, again, weighed them down. $700 million at the top line.
Now, analysts, are they missing this, the FX exposure that many of these companies have? Taking IBM as an example.
I believe so. I mean, if I looked at some of the, I saw McDonald's as another example. I look back at how many analysts were actually in the last 30 to 45 days adjusting their estimates. You actually found that nobody was doing it. Well, when did the large part of that move happen with the euro? It happened in September. So you didn't see much of the adjustment. So with the McDonald's, great example. Everybody expects an earnings at 143 EPS, likely to come under that. That's my guesstimate of it, looking at history and what they've done.
All right. So United Technologies is third that you think could actually miss estimates because they're under hedged versus the euro.
Right. So same exact story like at Philip Morris, understanding it and really then managing it only towards as good as they can. It's complex, but a lot of these corporations are still acting as if this was the 90s or the pre-2008 for sure.
Right, it's sort of buried in their 10Q, sort of the filings at mid-year that they have, and not something that they open their conference calls with necessarily.
No.
All right, Wolfgang, we got to hold it there. You're going to stay with us because we do want to talk, of course, about China, the impact that the yuan debate has been having potentially on companies that have operations in that country. Let's broaden the conversation of what's happening in China. Okay. You just told me during the break, interestingly, it's the impact that the yuan is having really on Brazil and Australia. Yes. That's one to keep an eye on.
Exactly. So as you're looking at China has become a pretty large customer of Brazil's, right? So if all of a sudden commodity prices are coming off, they're not demanding so much from Brazil, all of a sudden Brazil comes off. You saw it last quarter in companies like Alcoa, significantly impacted by a 16% depreciation of Brazilian real. They're holding that yuan currency pretty stable still. But when that thing goes, one way or the other, it's going to impact these companies. It's going to impact the Yums of the world who may have their revenues from there. If it goes up, that'll be very good for them.
Wolfgang, which of the companies that you follow closely are most exposed to both their labor costs increasing as a result of currency fluctuations and yet the products that they're selling decreasing because of currency fluctuations?
So the general trend is that people are just going more global. So it is, when you looked at, for example, let's go back to that IBM example. One of the things they're doing well is they've shown in 40 different countries double-digit growth. So what that does, it does expose them to a lot more currencies, but that's where they have to go growth. So we, for example, investigated in the last earnings season that 62% of CFOs or CEOs talked about double-digit growth in frontier markets.
All right, we got to leave it there, unfortunately. Thanks so much, Wolfgang. Always good to see you. That was
My
Wolfgang
pleasure.
Koester, CEO of Fireapps.